What you're about to see isn't just rare photos. Each shot has a mind-blowing story that few people know about. Take this photo, for example.
Winona Ryder was snapped in 1986 at a dive bar before her role in Lucas set her on the map. A friend of hers bet her that she could down a shot faster than he could, and she got a pack of smokes in the deal. Some months later, she was on set filming her breakout scenes. Backstage at Desilu Sound Stages in the late 60s, Nichelle Nichols wore her Starfleet uniform as she jumped backstage for Star Trek filming. As Uhura, she set new standards for TV, portraying a woman as a sharp officer who was never a stereotypical character. Martin Luther King Jr. told her to stay on the show when she considered quitting. In this 1912 shot, the Titanic's first-class gym shows high rollers rowing and punching bags days before the ship hit the iceberg. A gym with electric heaters and a sea view was standard for the elite passengers. It was among the first ships to have such a setup on board. François Hardy leans on his Honda 750 during the 60s after a long ride through Paris. A French singer with a hit album dropped this bike to avoid the paparazzi for a day. A cop pulled her over shortly after this shot to look at her license plate. Three samurai pose with a bow, spear, and tasseled rod for a hand-colored shot by Kusakabe Kimbei about 1880. The middle guy has a fur cover for his katana scabbard, a sign of rank in feudal Japan. One of the last photos of real samurai before the era ended for good. Major General Thomas Edward Lawrence rides through the Arabian desert on a camel during a 1916 raid during the Arab revolt against the Ottoman Empire. He had just persuaded a local tribe to fight with supplies he barely had. Here he is riding along days before one of his biggest victories at Aqaba. Some 1890s exams were studied by two Baylor University students in their dorm room with pinned photos and sketches as inspiration. It was a homemade oil lamp they rigged for studying late at night in a dorm that enforced lights-out rules. They all later became Texas senators, starting their careers at this desk. Soviet soldiers stopped in Berlin in 1945 to see an acrobat on a tank balancing with hoops. They'd crossed a river under heavy fire, lost half their unit, and needed a break. They did the show for 10 minutes before packing up and pushing on to the front. Stevie Nicks got snapped at a beach party in the 70s shortly after writing the first draft of Rhiannon for Fleetwood Mac. So she stayed up late, drank wine, and played guitar until a friend took her out to unwind. That became a hit at their next gig months later. In 1964, fishing boats and small traders packed Macau's waterfront, with no cranes visible. A local dock worker betted he could unload a shipment faster than his crew and win a week's worth of rice for his family. Now imagine those docks under the shadow of skyscrapers, with cargo ships moving 10 times the load. A group of women skated down New York streets in the 1940s, holding signs to save gas during wartime rationing. They worked at a factory making parts for fighter planes and figured skating would get them there faster than walking. An iceman delivered a block of ice in the 1890s, hauling it off his truck while two women watched, knowing their husbands wouldn't be home for hours. Back then, icemen were often blamed for stirring up trouble, since they'd show up at homes during the day in top shape. This guy got a tip in homemade pie, which he ate on his next stop down the road. Natalie Wood sat on the set of This Property is Condemned in 1966, getting her hair and makeup done before a big scene with Robert Redford. She just argued with the director over a line she refused to say, insisting it didn't fit her character. They compromised by cutting the line, and the scene ended up being a standout in the film. A crowd of fans lost it at a Beatles concert in the 1960s. Hearing "I Want to Hold Your Hand" live for the first time in a packed venue. Some had waited in line since 4 a.m. to get seats, only to end up on the floor from the excitement. The band had to stop mid-song because the screams were louder than their amps. Paul McCartney played Houston on August 19, 1965, strumming his Hofner bass during the Beatles' first U.S. tour stop at the Sam Houston Coliseum. The band had to dodge jelly beans thrown by the crowd, a weird fan tradition that started after a radio interview. They sold out the show in hours, grossing over $30,000 in ticket sales that night. Soviet sailors saluted a war veteran in Leningrad in 1989, honoring him during a parade along the Neva River. The vet, a double amputee from World War II, had just laid a wreath at a memorial marking 44 years since the war's end. He insisted on rolling out himself, refusing any help from the escort. The Titanic's first-class gym in 1912 had rowing machines and exercise bikes set up for the elite to stay fit while crossing the Atlantic. A ticket to use the gym cost $1 a day, and the room even had a map showing the ship's route. It was open only a few hours daily, closing just 2 days before the ship hit the iceberg. Flight attendants posed in a Pan Am jet cabin in the 1960s, showing off their new uniforms during a promotional shoot. The airline had just rolled out first-class service with extra legroom, and these women were trained to serve gourmet meals mid-flight. One of them spilled a tray of drinks on a passenger during the next flight, but he tipped her anyway. Slovak model Adriana Sklenarakova-Karembo stood next to French actor Jamel Debbouze at the 1999 César Awards in Paris, towering over him on the red carpet. She'd just presented an award for Best Short Film, while Debbouze was there to support his nominated comedy flick. They shared a laugh backstage after he tripped on her dress during a photo op. Titanic survivors boarded the Carpathia in 1912, crowding the deck after being pulled from lifeboats in the freezing Atlantic. The Carpathia's crew handed out blankets and hot soup, but ran out of supplies halfway through the rescue. One passenger gave up his coat to a shivering woman, who later mailed it back to him with a thank you note. A Baghdad street market buzzed in the early 1900s, with vendors selling fresh lamb from hooks under a shaded stall. One seller haggled with a buyer over a cut, throwing in an extra piece to seal the deal after a heated argument. Michael Jackson met Fred Astaire in the late 1970s at a private party, shaking hands after Astaire praised his dance moves on a TV special. Jackson had just released Off the Wall and was starstruck, asking Astaire for tips on his famous tap routines. They ended up swapping stories over coffee until the venue closed at midnight. A scientist tested women's shoes on a machine at the National Bureau of Standards in Washington, D.C. in 1945, simulating a month of wear in just a few hours. The device spun at 60 revolutions per minute, breaking down heels to see which brands held up best for wartime workers. Harold Agnew held the Nagasaki Bomb Corps in 1945, standing on Tinian Island just days before the mission that ended World War II. The FBI later redacted this photo to keep the Corps' design a secret, but Agnew kept a copy in his office for years. A man walked his dog down a Paris street in 1950, passing a Coca-Cola delivery bus with a Bien Glacé ad on its side. The driver had just dropped off crates to a cafe where locals argued over whether Coke tasted better than wine. That same bus broke down an hour later, blocking traffic till dusk. A koi fish swam in a Japanese pond in the early 1900s, part of a breed known to live for centuries, with the oldest reaching 226 years. This one belonged to a samurai family passed down through generations as a symbol of luck. It survived a harsh harsh winter that killed off half the pond, outliving every other fish there. Neil Armstrong baked a pizza in 1969, just weeks after walking on the moon trying to unwind at a friend's house in Houston. He'd never cooked one before and accidentally used too much sauce, making a mess that took an hour to clean up. His buddies still ate it, joking it was the best moon pie they'd ever had. A young fella stood outside an appliance store in 1948, glued to a TV screen showing a baseball game through the window in downtown Chicago. The store owner let him in to watch the last inning, even though he didn't have a dime to buy anything. Natalie Wood took a break on her patio in 1963, chatting on the phone while prepping for her next role in Love with the Proper Stranger. She'd just wrapped a long day of rehearsals and was waiting for a script change that came in late that night. Her dog kept barking at the neighbor's cat, cutting the call short. John F. Kennedy pardoned a Thanksgiving turkey in 1963 at the White House, starting a tradition just days before his trip to Dallas. The bird, a 55-pounder, was a gift from a California farmer who'd driven cross-country to deliver it. Kennedy sent it to a local farm to live out its days, joking it was too tough to eat. Marissa Tomei posed for a photo shoot in the early 2000s, fresh off her Oscar win for My Cousin Vinny and prepping for a new role in a Broadway play. She'd just turned down a big-budget film to focus on theater, a move that surprised her agent but paid off with rave reviews. The shoot took place in a swanky hotel with wallpaper that cost more than her first car. A London cameraman hung in a metal bucket in the 1930s, filming the city from hundreds of feet up with no safety harness while construction roared below. He'd been hired to capture footage for a newsreel, but a sudden gust of wind nearly tipped him out halfway through the shoot. The film made it to theaters, showing a bird's-eye view of the skyline most folks had never seen. Ford tested a wild wheel design in the 1960s, mounting a car on 4 spherical tires to let it move in any direction, but the prototype never made it to production. The test driver spun out on the first run, crashing into a barrier because the wheels were too hard to control. Engineers scrapped the idea after just 3 months, calling it a $1 million flop. Chinese President Jiang Zemin shared a laugh with Henry Kissinger in 1995 over coffee at a Beijing summit, discussing trade deals that had shaped the next decade. Jiang had just quoted an old proverb to break the ice, catching Kissinger off guard with his humor. Anita Ekberg presented a roasted turkey at a dinner party in the 1960s, hosting friends after wrapping a long day on a Hollywood set. She'd spent hours cooking, even though she'd never roasted a bird before, and nearly burned the kitchen down when the oven overheated. Everyone still dug in, saying it was the best meal they'd had all week. 2 women walked through a